welcome to I Remember When, sponsored by the Gresham Historical Society. I'm Gwenda McCall. This evening we have as our guest a gentleman who has been logging since he was 16 years old, and he has brought some marvelous pictures with him that his dad took around the turn of the century in logging camps. I'd like you to meet Jim Yandell. Jim, thank you for joining us this evening.
You're welcome.
I'd like to begin by talking about your family history a little bit. Now, your father was a logger all his life.
Right.
And he was born when? In
1881.
1881, so then he would have been logging about 1900, and that would make him 9 years. Well, okay, around the turn of the century. Let's start with this picture. Can you tell us a little bit about this picture, Jim?
Yes, that's taken one of the old mill sites out of Ames, Oregon.
And we will have a close-up on your father. And as we go through the program, we will have close-ups on Jim's father, John. These are marvelous pictures. And your folks.
Yes. My father and mother.
And about how old are they?
He's 23 and she's 17.
This looks like a wedding picture to me.
It's their wedding day.
And what year would it be?
1904.
1904. I like this one.
And that's the old Davenport Mill at Ames, Oregon.
And can you tell us a little bit more about it? I noticed that there's an arrow to one of the houses in the background.
I think that's where I might have been born, some of my sisters.
How many sisters did you have?
5.
And you were the only boy?
Right.
The 5 sisters? And right in the center is a structure that goes up into the air and then drops off into nothing. What is that?
That's a conveyor to take the waste material out and burn it.
You mean like sawdust?
Had to do in early days. Sawdust and slab.
And bark dust and...
Right.
And
there was no such thing as bark dust, so everything went into one place.
Now, was this the forerunner of wigwam burners?
Yes, they sometimes had built an open cave or something to put it in, and then they had wigwams later.
Mm-hmm. I can remember coming down Mount Hood at nighttime with my family and seeing the wigwam burners going, all the sparks flying. Now this is taken in the same area, right?
Right. Yes.
And there's some homes that the loggers would have lived in with their families.
Yes, there were several bunkhouses and so on, but this is a little bit before my time even. I don't remember some of this.
Okay.
There was some of us standing when we left there. I think it was in the early 20s.
Then this was in Ames. Now I did make a map up for our audience so that we can tell them where Ames is, because when I first met you, I did not know myself, Jim. You want to point out Ames here for us?
Well, Ames is near Bull Run, right here.
All right. And here's Gresham.
And that was the old end of the old streetcar line that went from Portland, and they come out to get cordwood for families and houses.
You know, I heard that one of the things that supported the streetcar line was the fact that it did carry lumber in.
Yes, there wasn't much traffic as far as people's concerned.
You have a story to tell us about when you were a little boy on a streetcar.
Yes, Mother took me in to get my tonsils out, and somehow or another they couldn't make arrangements. She bought me a hat, and I had my head out to when they went in the Bull Run River, I guess.
Oh, I have a picture here of the Bull Run trolley coming into Dodge Park over this wooden trestle, and this could have been the very place where little Jim Yandell lost his brand new hat.
Probably.
Our next picture is one of your class pictures. Do you want to tell us which little fellow you are, Jim?
I'm, I think, second from the left. Fellow with a striped, I guess you'd call it a blazer or something on. It was actually a Gene Tunney sweater at that time.
Gene Tunney, I'm sorry, Tunney.
He fought Jack Dempsey once or twice.
Oh, and
but that's the sweater they had patterned, and that's what they called it.
And this was the Gene Tunney style.
Right.
Great picture. Now, you didn't live all your life in Ames, though. You did move into Gresham later on. Is that correct?
Right.
We have a picture of Gresham Now this must be, we figure from the cars, about 1928 or 30. And we're on Powell Street looking which direction?
And we're looking east there.
And on the right is the Hamlin garage, which would later be Fred Haas's garage. His wife was our guest on our last show.
Mm-hmm.
And these buildings are no longer here on the right. Tell us what's here now in Gresham.
Nothing. It's just a park, Gresham Park. It was all built out of on stilts on that side of the street, and all boardwalks when I first come to Gresham.
Now, what did your family come to Gresham for? To buy supplies, or why would they come?
Well, there was only one store in Bull Run, and it didn't carry much. You had no clothing or anything there, just food.
One thing that interested me about this photograph again was I figured that a person had to be standing on the water trough that had the Statue of Liberty on the top of it to be taking this picture.
I think that's a possibility.
And here's the school you went to when you came to Gresham.
Right, that's the old West Gresham School.
And it looks the same now, except for the cars, because my children went there last year. You had a story to tell us about Santa Claus when you were a little boy out in Ames. Can you tell us about what happened with Santa Claus?
Yeah, they brought in some child that died, and they brought all his presents that he'd cut from previous years that amounted to wagons built out of wooden wheels and sleigh and a whole bunch of stuff. I was really surprised. And there was quite a bit of snow. We had a big party at that time at that house. I didn't know what everybody was there for, but everybody in the country was there.
Oh, and since you were the only little boy, you got all the gifts that were intended for this other little boy.
That's right.
When I was visiting with you earlier about your father, I understood that he's a very sensitive man. You let me read one of the letters that he wrote to you when he was a little boy, and he described the waves dashing on the shore, and he had beautiful handwriting. I'm really impressed with all the pictures that he saved, too. You want to tell us a little bit about this one? This goes back a ways, I'd say.
Well, I would say that's where they dumped logs over a hill and then gathered them with the horses to bring them on where they were going with the mills, ride someplace. It shows in the background that there's been something sliding down that hill pretty steep. That's the way the early logging was done.
You had to get the log to land in the right place? Or
before they had machinery, they had to roll them some way off of these hills when they got off the flats.
And then there was a little bit more inventions, and tell us about this picture.
Well, that's when they first started what you call high lead logging. And when they quit ground logging, pulling logs on the ground, they went up in the air to get deflection to keep these logs from hanging up. They'd hang behind all the stumps, and when they went this high in a tree, there was very little hang up. These machines got to be very fast, these steam donkeys.
A steam donkey? This is a steam donkey?
Yes.
This thing?
They are much faster than anything we have today with all our power.
Is that right?
And our diesel.
And now explain to me though why they had this tall tree and what's it called and what are all these lines?
That's a spar tree, and that's to keep the logs coming without hanging up. In other words, you'd come up a grade and you'd hit a stump. If you come straight across, you hit a stump. These would bounce off when they're actually a lead.
All right, this is another picture of a steam donkey, and this was your grandpa, correct?
Right.
I think it's a very clear picture, and it shows the spools with the lines coming off.
That's where they were ground leading before they started the high lead.
So this is where the trees would have snagged on all the stumps.
Right.
Okay.
And they had to.
And this was probably ground work again, do you think?
Right.
Now there are two spools here. Why are there two?
Well, one's the haul back and one's the main line. One pulled the line back and the other one pulled it in.
So one was...
In the early days, they had horses to pull. They had no haul back. They pulled the horses out with the horses and then pulled the line back with the yarder.
So if we see a picture of a steam donkey that only has one spool, then we know it's a really old one.
Right.
Oh, that's interesting. Now, we have a few other pictures of steam donkeys that we're going to show the audience, but let's go ahead and I'll talk to you about other things while they're looking at these pictures of steam donkeys that these pictures your father has saved. First of all, can you define to me a whistle punk? What is a whistle punk?
Well, he gave a signal to do what you had to do with a log when you hooked onto a log or stop the rigging to hook onto a log. They were the ones that give the signal into the actual donkey or yard or whatever you call them.
So it was a very important job, but he didn't have to be a very big man.
You know, it was one of the most important jobs because he could actually keep somebody from getting hurt by blowing a whistle when he'd seen something wrong that somebody else couldn't see.
All right, what is a choker setter? Choker setter.
He's the fellow that wraps the line around these logs to pull them in.
And the choker is the line that you put around the log.
Right.
A widow maker.
That's something that when they're falling timber could hang up in another tree, possibly a limb or a top of another tree, and it's hanging there and possibly nobody sees it. And it could come down without warning.
And kill somebody.
And it has.
The term gyppo logger.
Well, that's more of a type of a small operator that goes around and takes contracts for bigger companies.
It sounds derogatory, but it's not meant to be derogatory, is it?
Not really.
Okay. Clear cutting. What is clear cutting?
That's where you take all the timber down and nowadays replant, which they didn't do in the early days. They just took the timber off and burnt and let it grow back the way it could.
Now, all of these pictures that we're seeing with your father are of old-growth timber. Do we still have old-growth timber around?
Oh, yes.
Where would we see it?
Oh, like on the Bull Run, Clackamas River, and lots of places, all the old main streams, McKinsey, and in Washington. There's a lot of old-growth timber left, but of course it's getting stale and rotten and everything else, but it should be left, I suppose.
To protect some of it, I suppose. What are we cutting now then if we're not cutting the old growth?
We're cutting second growth timber mostly.
Okay. I've noticed that you have a great admiration for these early loggers. Can you tell me why?
I don't know, they seem to have a lot of horse sense, and looking back they do things that we're just coming into right now.
Well, as I look at some of these pictures, I agree they had to be pretty clever, because I don't imagine too many of these fellows went to college before they got out here to the woods.
Not really.
Now, tell us a little bit about this picture.
Well, that's evidently where they're building a pond for the mill site. So that's where they usually floated the logs into, they got the logs into the mills.
So this is a man-made pond. I wonder why they didn't just dig a hole in the ground.
I don't think they had machinery to do that those days.
Oh, so it would be easier to build the pond above water, like an above-ground swimming pool. You can see they haven't put all the wood in on some of the sides here, and then fill it up with water.
Right.
For heaven's sake.
All the early day logging roads were either railroad or plank. They had no gravel or anything.
There was so much
wood. It was all
wood
built on stilts.
That everything was wood, the roads and everything. Goodness. All right, this picture, tell us a little about this one.
Well, that's where they're pulling the logs up over the side in the pond with some kind of a yarder.
Do you think this could be that same man-made pond that we were looking at?
It looks like that they built a skid up to the top of that so it don't wreck the machine, and just wreck the dam and pull them right over.
Okay.
Easy way to do it.
And what are they building here, do you think?
I think that may be a flume to either flume lumber or to maybe something to skid logs on.
Now, for neophytes like me, you're going to have to tell us what a flume is, please.
Well, it's something you build that holds water and builds like a gravity. And
so it's like a big aqueduct then? And
it would, the boards would go on their own power down where they want them.
That's one way to do it.
That's what they had here at Palmer in the early days. They floated their lumber all down to Columbia.
And how long would that flume be, do you think?
Probably 6 miles.
For heaven's sake. All right. I especially like this picture because it has the picture of the steam donkey and the wood, right? What is the cordwood all stacked up there on the steam donkey?
That's the kind of fuel they had to make the steam.
And they're pulling these logs from way up the hill, and
it looks like they've pulled, they've got a long bunch of skids, and they're pulling them probably 10 or 15 logs at a time from the other end, and they're just floating into the pond as they come.
All right. Tell us a little bit more about what it was like living in a logging camp growing up. What did your family do for leisure time?
I think probably everybody had a cow or a horse, and they more or less tried to get something to eat rather than think about going to a show. There wasn't any, or going to town. There was no transportation.
So it was really just a lot of work, a lot of hard work.
That's right.
Now, I do have some pictures of your father, though, having a good time. In this picture, he was a musician.
Right.
He saved photographs, had beautiful handwriting, wrote poetically, and he was a musician. He's playing the guitar, but he also played the
violin.
The violin in a fiddle type.
Yes, he could play for dances any old way.
Good for
him. I remember him and Mother playing.
And she played too?
Mm-hmm.
For heaven's sake. And this picture.
Well, that's where he's a ball player.
What was his position?
He was a pitcher. He was always at a ball team someplace.
That's great. What fun. I like those little hats, too. They don't have very big brims on them.
No, I guess it must be homemade. I don't know.
All right.
I know Mother built his suit and did a good job of it.
She sewed his suit?
Right.
Somebody sewed the other ones, too. I wonder if she did them all. I remember reading in a 1908 newspaper, it said something like, 2 men in a logger were drowned. And it really caught my eye. They didn't think loggers were, they must have thought they were a special breed of people. Why didn't they just say 3 men drowned? Have you found that loggers have been thought of as being different?
I think they're a breed of their own. Like a motorcycle rider, they're a different breed too. They live dangerously, and probably not as any more dangerously than a logger.
I think of loggers as being a little more romantic, though, more like a cowboy. And then with the Paul Bunyan stories,
I think so. They're their own breed of people, and to find a logger nowadays that's going to stick with us pretty hard, because they come because they want money, and they don't study their job like they used to.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they try to get ahead. The early time loggers tried to get a better job, work their way into in this business or any other business. You try to get ahead. Mm-hmm. Now they just come to get a job, most of them. Mm-hmm. And not all that way. There is pretty good loggers, but you'll find a great percentage are just out there to not study and go ahead with it.
Doing their 8 to 5 and take home their paycheck.
Yeah, and they're not looking forward to logging in their life.
Now, all of the loggers weren't rough and tumble, though. I was reading where they were excavating the Palmer lumber camp out around Larch Mountain, and they found artifacts in there of china teacups and mustache cups and porcelain dolls that the little girls played with, so that must have been very Victorian and proper out the Palmer camp.
Oh, yeah.
That was about 1902 when it burned down.
That's nice.
I heard rumor that you were at Murphy's Pool Hall on the day that Prohibition ended. You want to tell us a little bit about that?
That was quite a day.
How old were you?
17.
17?
And they didn't pay attention to your age those days around Gresham.
Mm-hmm.
About having a drink of beer or whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And there was one place you could hole up and get out of the rain. There was no other recreation in Gresham. And high school was the only thing here.
That's a good point. So it was either go play basketball at the gymnasium or go sit in the pool hall.
That's right.
All right.
And that's where you could behave, too.
As long as we're talking about rumors, I heard a rumor that they were diapering the horses at the Bull Run watershed when they were doing horse logging out there. Is that true?
That's a law.
That's so funny. What did they diaper the horses for?
Well, I guess they tried to diaper the elk. They couldn't catch them, so they diapered the horses. There's more of those than there are horses, but I don't know why.
Well, who would make them diaper the horses, for heaven's sake?
I think you ought to know better than I do, environmentalists.
Oh, well, some of the things they are working for seem to make a lot of sense.
Well, I believe you're right, but there's some things that don't make sense.
Let's talk a little bit about the clothing that the early loggers wore. Can you tell me some of the standard clothing?
Well, just a pair of cork shoes, and I think most of them in the early days, I understand, I didn't see them, but they had wool underwear on year-round.
Year-round?
I don't know whether they took a bath or not. I hope they did.
Goodness. I can see why to keep you warm in the winter, but I can't imagine wearing wool underwear in the summer.
I think it maybe did something cooling effect then. I don't know. It's real wool.
Now, they all have the boots on with the spikes on the bottom. What are those boots called?
Cork shoes.
Cork shoes? Cork boots?
Yeah.
And some of the fellas have their pant legs cut off. What's the purpose of that?
They keep them snagging in the brush.
Oh, so that you don't catch your
Right.
cuff or something on it. Okay, and here's another picture that's just some people standing on a log. And the fellow to the far right has his pants cut off way above the ankle, but he also has a lady's hat on.
Well, he's having fun, isn't he?
Like you see.
That's an early day. That has to be in the early 1900s. So that's my pop right there in the middle with a black hat on.
Oh, good. We'll get a close-up on that. We have another picture of your father here laying in a bunkhouse. You can tell us, I see that there's actually newspaper on the wall. That must be for insulation. Can you tell us a story about him in the bunkhouse?
Well, I think he's possibly, I see his violin and guitar, he's probably just wore out from maybe, and I don't think that's at home. I think he's probably taking a job somewhere else. I don't recognize it.
Just crashed for the evening. It's awfully hard work, isn't it, Jim?
It really is.
Now, you were telling me earlier that you had stayed in bunkhouses and that you had an experience with bed bugs.
Right.
Tell me about the bed bugs.
Well, they're horrible.
Are they big or little? I've never met one.
Well, the mattress they used to have had a ring around the edge. That you know, our mattresses nowadays are all slick, but the bed bugs would get in these cracks in the mattress, and before you know it, there was a mass of them. So we used to take our beds and put coal oil all around that, and then take the beds themselves outside and burn them with gas to get rid of them. And then the guys, we'd get rid of them, here comes some transient loggers, bring some more in.
Oh my goodness, so you just couldn't keep up with the bed bugs.
Well, we did finally weed them out, but they're the most horrible thing in the world.
Ooh, I can't imagine. All right, here we have a picture of some fellas standing around, and what are those sticks that they're holding?
Peaveys.
Peavey? P-E-A-V-Y? V-E-Y? Peavey? What's a peavey?
Well, that's just something they turn a log over with.
Can you describe it a little bit?
They have a hook on a point, and they have a hook on the back, and they just actually get so clever they can throw it at and grab a log, and even while it's rolling, and if it isn't too big, you know, tip them over. But
so you really can't.
That's the way they handle log. Most everybody had a peavey almost in their pocket. They had to have.
For heaven's sake.
That was 2 or 3 guys that it took to roll logs down when they were sawing them.
All right. This picture fascinates me because the men are standing on, well, one man, the one on the right, is standing on a board. Tell us a little about these boards.
That's a springboard, and they used that in the early days to get away from swell in the stump or in the tree, or get away from pitch.
So they found that if they worked up higher, how did the springboard fit in the hole? What made it stay?
Well, they cut a hole just right to fit it, and then it had a horseshoe-looking thing upside down, and it caught into the wood, and they could swing that board around just like it was in a socket.
For heaven's sake. And what kept the saw from hanging up in the pitch?
The pitch, they use a bottle of kerosene usually.
Oh, and pour it right on the saw and that would melt
Right.
the... For heaven's sake. Now these three pictures are kind of a before, during, and after pictures of your father. Do you want to tell us what he's doing?
Well, the first picture towards you, he's getting ready to take the top out of the tree, and then the second one, he's starting to rig it. The third one, he has it rigged, practically. I see him in the top there yet. But there's a lot of lines on there to contend with, I'll tell you.
Boy, I guess. And those pulley things he's hooking up, those were heavy too, weren't they?
Yeah, they weighed up to 1,500 pounds, some of them.
Mm. All right, I'd like to take a little time to talk about you, Jim. We haven't talked about you. Are you still logging now?
Right.
Do you want to tell us how old you are?
I'm just a little over 70.
70 years old and you're still logging. What is your title? What kind of work do you do?
I'm I guess a contract logger, you call 'em.
Contract logger. Now, I heard that you have a nickname. What's your nickname?
Well, I have a Sal, actually.
Sal? How did you get a nickname like Sal?
Well, when I was about 15, they had a party in this logging camp, and they liked one woman of having enough for a pinochle round.
Uh-huh.
So this girl started calling me Sally, and it stuck with me.
And that's how you got your nickname.
Right.
But you had one more nickname, and that was...
I'm not saying.
Oh, you're not going to tell us?
You mean Bones?
Bones, that was one. How did
Right.
you get the nickname Bones?
Well, I guess I come by it right. I was pretty slim when I was a kid, and I got sick and lost a lot of pounds.
And
So that's kind of stuck around.
So if we talk about Sal or Bones Yandell, the loggers will know who we're talking about.
Most everybody around the country, I imagine, would.
Do you think that logging is dangerous now?
Yes, it is.
Just as dangerous as it was years ago, even with all the new safety precautions?
Right. It's more dangerous because the guys are greener that takes to the woods.
Oh.
And they don't have sometimes don't have a leader. It's actually, to me, not dangerous at all, more than driving your car down the road. You just got to stay out of the way.
Well, has logging changed much in the recent years?
Very much.
How has it changed?
You have to do it more modern equipment. Do your set your outfits in a different place. The things have gone to. The yards have gone to steel towers and shorter, and you have to set out close and yard twice as fast as you used to.
Twice as fast to get out.
In other words, you have to keep up with these steam yarders nowadays, or you can't make it.
You have a picture in this album that I'd like to share quickly because our time is almost up. This is a logging truck that you loaded, back when you were about 20 or 30. And tell us what's unique.
Early 40s.
Early 40s. Tell us what's unique about this sides of this logging truck.
Well, they don't have the tall stakes like they have on the trucks now. And these things here, you had to load a load on or it wouldn't stay. You can't just load it haphazard, throw it at the load.
So they stacked the logs up so perfectly.
Right.
That
you didn't even need a chain on them.
Oh, Jim, this has been fascinating. I wish we could go on forever, but we really do have to quit. Thank you so much for joining us this evening.
You're really welcome.
And thank you for joining us, too. We'll see you again soon. I'm Gwenda McCall. Thank you for joining us on I Remember When.